So welcome to the scientific study of inheritance, the science of genetics, the study of how characteristics are passed on from parents to their offspring. Now, people have known for a long time that characteristics are passed on from parents to offspring. We can see this in likenesses between parents and their children. So this man has a son, and his son is one of those four gentlemen. Which one do you think it is? Well, most people can guess correctly, even if they don't know them, that this is the one. Another example, this man, which one is his son? And again, most people can guess, maybe from the similarities in chins, that his son is here. And the final one, a famous father and his son, very similar looking, here. So the idea from this is that characteristics are passed on from parents to children, and what we want to think about is how this works. But of course, offspring can sometimes be quite different from their parents. Here's a mother here and her child, and that's also something that we will think of. So our big question in studying genetics is, why are offspring produced from two parents both similar to and different from their parents? So in talking about inheritance, we'll introduce imaginary animals called rebobs. Here are two here, and we can say that they're good for genetic research because they breed quickly and they have clearly defined traits or characteristics such as the colour of the antennae, the colour of the snout, the tail colour or the leg colour. And so we're going to introduce two rebobs, father and the mother, and the father's name we will call Bob and the mother's name Samantha, and you can see that the father has a green snout, the mother has a red snout. Apart from that, they're pretty much identical. Now here's the interesting thing, here are their children, and you can notice that their children all have green snouts. So in other words, the red snout characteristic of their mother seems to have disappeared. Now, rebobs aren't like humans, brothers and sisters can breed together, so let's take a look at what the children of these rebobs look like. In other words, Bob and Samantha's grandchildren. So here we have Bob and Samantha's grandchildren, and there are four of them here, and if you notice, three of them have green snouts, but one of them has a red snout. The red snout colour has reappeared in the grandchildren's generation. So just to summarise that, so we have this trait of snout colour, characteristic of snout colour, and the parents, one parent had a red snout, the other had a green snout. First generation were all green snouts, and the second generation were mostly green, but the red appeared again, and about 3/4 were green and about 1/4 were red. So how can we explain these results? Well, some time ago there was a famous scientist called Professor Grigor Mendala, and he thought about this, and he came up with the idea that inheritance of characteristics is caused by something passed from parents to offspring. And we now call the things passed from parents to offspring genes. So it's the inheritance of genes which causes characteristics to be inherited by children. So what the professor said was that the trait that he studied, snout colour, is controlled by one gene that occurs in two forms, and alternative forms of a gene are called alleles. So there are two different alleles of the gene for snout colour. One of these alleles gives a snout with the colour red, and the other produces a snout with the colour green. Now, very importantly, some alleles are what we call dominant, and others are recessive. And a key idea is an organism with the dominant allele for a trait will always have that trait. but an organism with the recessive allele for a trait will only have that trait if the dominant allele is not present. So I wonder if we can make sense of these words to explain the results that we've been speaking about with snout colour. Now, an important convention in genetics is that alleles are represented by letters. So a dominant allele is given by an uppercase letter, and the recessive allele for the same gene is given by the same letter but in lowercase. So we'll try and use these ideas of dominant and recessive alleles to explain what happened. Remember, Dad had a green snout, Mum had a red snout, but all their children had green snouts. So to explain these results, we'll say that Dad has two dominant alleles, which we'll call big G, big G. Sex cells will only have one of those, but all of Dad's sex cells will be big G, because there's no other allele there. And we'll say that Mum has two recessive alleles, and we'll call those small g, small g. And these are the alleles which give the red snout. Now, as Mum only has small g, so all of her sex cells will have the small g allele. So here's what happens in fertilization. Here's Dad's sex cell, here's Mum's sex cell. Dad's sex cells are all big G, Mum's sex cells are all small g, so the offspring will all have big G, small g as their combination of alleles. And because big G, the green snout colour, green snout allele is dominant, all the offspring will have green snouts. So all the offspring have this combination of alleles. So think about what will happen when they produce sex cells. Here's what will happen. The children's sex cells can be big G or small g. These are the male gametes. Or big G, small g for the female gametes. So what will happen when fertilization takes place to make the grandchildren of Bob and Samantha? Well, there are four possibilities. Big G can join with big G can join with small g can join with big G, or small g with small g. So there are these four possibilities here. So these three of the four possibilities will all have green snouts, and this one will have a red snout. So in other words, about 3/4 green snouts, about 1/4 red snouts. So here's a conversation between Bob and Samantha. And maybe you can give some good answers to that question that Samantha asked. Oh, and I should say that all of this business about Gregor Mendel I just made up. The actual father of genetics was Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk who experimented with peas in the monastery garden. So this is Mendel here, the father of genetics. And Mendel used peas because they show well-defined traits which are controlled by dominant and recessive alleles. But peas aren't always interesting for kids at school. If you've understood what we've been talking about, then you should be able to complete the sentences 1 to 4.